I see the live button in the corner of my screen here. Friday afternoon is the Ovadia Heart Health live stream. And I am so thrilled and honored today that I have Dr. Doug McGuff here as our guest. And we've got lots of things that we'd love to start diving into. However, first and foremost, I have to let everyone know this podcast, this live stream, is not intended for personal medical advice. If you're interested in personal medical advice from Dr. Philip Ovadia, please reach out to us at team@ifixhearts.com. We will be letting you know if you're interested in working with Dr. McGuff, how you can reach him. But this is just for inspiration and information today. Welcome, Doug. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Well, not only do you have lots of fans in our Ovadia team, but I know you've got lots of fans out there listening in today from our various venues. That said, I bet we have a few who don't know about your work. How about giving us the shorter version of your background, your medical background, but also your historical work in what I call science-based strength training?
Sure. So my interest in resistance exercise probably began when I was a teenager around age 14. I was actually an athlete competing in a sport called bicycle motocross, and I just happened to take up resistance training as a performance improvement and found it to be the closest thing to a miracle I ever experienced. And concurrent with that, started training in a Nautilus gym back in the 1970s. And Nautilus was kind of the original people that brought high intensity resistance exercise to public awareness and helped refine the protocols that ultimately became what we're using today. But as that backdrop, that created my interest in biology and medicine that led me to go to college and on to medical school. I actually selected as my specialty coming out of medicine, emergency medicine, because I tended to have more of an affinity and a natural talent for it. So I selected that as a specialty. And I continue to practice full-time in emergency medicine. I'm also subspecialty certified in advanced emergency ultrasound and teaching an ultrasound fellowship. But starting all the way back in 1997, when I first went into private practice, I actually was able to accumulate enough capital and open my first studio, which was Ultimate Exercise in Seneca, South Carolina. That's right outside Clemson University. In 1997, and began training clients. We have since opened a second studio in Greenville, South Carolina. But over the years, we've done thousands upon thousands of sessions and have refined our approach. And a lot of that approach is what went into the writing of the book, Body by Science, which is probably how you guys discovered me. But it basically just details what we've learned along the way about how to best perform resistance exercise, both for performance and health-related benefits.
Oh, quite a career. And as I just flashed up, like being in school, show and tell. Many of us on the team have our own copy, Body by Science. And for any of our listeners, if this isn't in your book repertory, highly recommended. We do for all of our clients. We particularly promoters of resistance training. But let's, speaking of the book, jump a little bit into something that was at the very beginning of the book, just kind of looking over it this last week, looking at my sticky notes in there. You talk in the very beginning part of the book about the lack of clarity when we talk about defining health, fitness, and exercise. Can you share a little bit of your knowledge on why that actually even matters?
Yeah, sure. So it's a natural inclination to conflate exercise and fitness, but you can have one without the other, and you can actually sacrifice health in the attempt to acquire fitness. You can acquire fitness in a way that actually damages your health. So we wanted to define health as both an absence of disease, and that fitness is just actually an improvement of your physiologic headroom, or the difference between the most you can do and the least you can do. But we want to emphasize acquiring fitness in a manner that not only preserves health, but enhances health, because it is possible to acquire fitness in a way that in a long-term process actually undermines health and can cause damage. And we really wanted to address that at the front of the book to say what we want to propose is something that looks at the physics and biology of exercise, and uses that understanding to produce a protocol to improve physiologic adaptations in a way that also enhances health.
Well, anecdotally, I can say I was a professional dancer for 32 years. And while I became extremely good at that, it had some physical consequences.
Oh, yes. My daughter, she was a ballerina from age 4 all the way up to college. Actually got admitted into college in a ballet program. It was a decision, a fork in the road for doing a pre-professional route and going a cours de ballet of a company versus doing the more academic route. But by the time college was rolling around, she had developed, significant overuse injuries to the point that she kind of reconsidered what her career path would be, simply because of, at the age of 18, already having accumulated significant long-term injuries. She was very, very fit, but as a consequence of that fitness and how it was acquired, had already developed health issues.
Yep. And I'm definitely was in that boat when I stopped dancing at age 42, which is ancient in the career.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is that example that you might be fit, but not necessarily healthy.
Yes.
And still a little bit in that side. One of the statements in your book, a little bit on definition, jogging and running, by your definition, should be excluded from exercise. Well, to some of our listeners, this might be controversial. How to kind of help us paint a picture here on what that actually means and is significant in terms of aging.
Yeah, it kind of depends upon your definitions. Now, our definition of exercise is something that basically recruits the skeletal muscle, and does so in a fairly aggressive way that results in a level of fatigue that's accumulated relatively rapidly, as opposed to just any activity that's done for a prolonged period of time to produce an adaptation. We define high-intensity resistant exercise as exercise, running, jogging, things of that nature. We would put more in a category of a recreational activity that has risks and benefits. Some of the benefits are physiologic adaptations that are an improvement and result in elevated fitness. But in exchange for risks, both long-term and short-term, of injury. So in the short term, acute injuries, simply because the forces involved with running can exceed structural integrity of certain body parts and you can get acutely injured. But on a more chronic basis, just damage that can accumulate over years and decades that may not come to fruition until you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and all of a sudden, you're in line for a joint replacement that otherwise would not have happened. So we're looking at something that maximizes physiologic adaptation and results while minimizing the risk as much as possible. And something that does that to the maximal degree is what we consider exercise. Things that create an imbalance in that risk to benefit ratio, we would put more along a recreational continuum with significant risks.
And we try to help simplify for a lot of our clients and maybe for some of our listeners, and that's the goal of this program. We will use sort of casual terms like what you say, recreational or daily movement, and then your structured exercise, that which
Yes.
is going to enhance. Is that a similar type of thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. So, exercise per se, especially resistance exercise, is going to be something that is logical, that is very focused and goal directed to produce a measured amount of muscular involvement and fatigue to stimulate an adaptive response. Most people, when they think about exercise, think of it as something that directly causes a change in the body. The ab roller will firm and tighten your abs. That's not how exercise works. Exercise is a stimulus. It is a negative threat that's brought to the body, and then the body, having received that stimulus, synthesizes an adaptive response in the hours and days that follow. So we think of exercise as something that is done deliberately to stimulate an adaptive response. Now, activity in general, movement, is something that exists as a backdrop and is necessary and important. A fairly large volume of low intensity activity is a necessary backdrop for healthy metabolism and just general health. And rather than programming that deliberately, we have found that if someone is appropriately strength trained, that their activity level spontaneously and organically rises. So someone that you take them and you start strength training them, by the time they've increased their strength by 25 to 30%, their non-exercise activity thermogenesis will go up by about an equal amount. So you just spontaneously become more active as a backdrop in your daily life. And that's how we like to see it occur, as opposed to this sort of structured, artificially introduced 45 minutes in zone 2 on an exercise bike, or accumulating 10,000 steps per day. If someone is appropriately physically trained and they get stronger, they naturally rise to those levels of activity as just a spontaneous adaptation.
Very interesting that sort of comparable improvement there. We see that, and just to speak anecdotally, when people start to improve their metabolic markers, right? We're working in a telemedicine business. Their their desire to want to move a little bit more increases as they feel that their body is able to produce a little bit more energy.
Yeah.
Y- One of the things in your book, and there's a lot of terms these days floating around that individuals get confused about. At least this is what we hear in our medical practice. Things like, what is zone 2, and what is, in your book, you refer to steady state activity. Can you help us understand those different things, and how high intensity is very different from that?
Yes. So it all depends on how much demand is being placed on the skeletal muscle, that determines how large a percentage of the available muscle fibers are being recruited for that activity. And if I can use the screen just to represent, in a given muscle, the different types of muscle fiber types, you will have initially, you will have what are called lower order motor units, which are slow twitch fibers. Those are more aerobic in their metabolism. They have a better endurance profile, and they recover from exertion very quickly. And then you have intermediate fibers that are sort of in between. And then finally, you have higher order motor units, which are fast twitch fibers that are more powerful but fatigue quickly and recover slowly. So if the muscle is placed under a significant load and it does work that's continuous and uninterrupted, what will happen is these lower order motor units, you will recruit and fatigue those. And then, having done that, you will next recruit the next level and fatigue those. And if you fatigue them quickly enough, you will then tap into the highest order motor units and fatigue those before these down here have had a chance to recover. If you do that, you have tapped all the different available motor units within the skeletal muscle and fatigued them, and that's a very powerful exercise stimulus. Now, when you do steady state activity or zone 2 type activity, what you're doing is the muscle is under significantly less demand. So what happens is you recruit and start fatiguing these lower order motor units, but their premium characteristic is that they recover quickly, sometimes in fractions of a second. So with that lower demand, what happens is by the time you're ready to go into the next level of motor units and recruit them, you already have fibers down here that are recovering. So they're recovering quickly enough that you never proceed in the orderly recruitment of the intermediate and the higher order motor units, but instead just recycle through these slow twitch, quick recovering motor units over and over again. The way this became a thing was back in the 70s when exercise physiology was first born. We had a problem of when your only tool is a hammer, the whole world is a nail. The only tool for exercise physiologists to measure any sort of performance at the time was VO2 max testing. And basically that's a tight fitting mask over your face, connect to tubing that connects to a machine that measures the amount of oxygen you use and convert to carbon dioxide and water. But because it's this big, huge apparatus, a study subject could only participate in using this measuring device if they were sitting still. So that meant that they were either on a treadmill or a bicycle ergometer. And because what you were measuring was oxygen uptake, it's the only thing that was available. So a couple things happened is they started to make the correlation between physical activity, exercise, and health benefits. And because that was their only measuring tool and the only mechanism by which they could use that tool, it started to conflate low intensity, steady state activity with cardiovascular benefit to the extent that low intensity, steady state activity just basically got named cardio. When in fact that a more aggressive type of exercise that recruited higher order motor units got all of the benefit down here on the low end, but also additional benefits that came along with recruiting these higher order motor units. But that was never known, and it, by that point in time, had gotten into the cultural lexicon that cardio and steady state and the health benefits were all intrinsically linked together. Going along with that was the notion that this exercise was doing something directly to the cardiac and vascular system, when in fact that was occurring to a very small degree. The adaptations were actually physiologic adaptations and biochemical adaptations that were occurring in the periphery out in the skeletal muscles. Now, the one thing that demonstrated this is early on there was a study, and I can't recall the exact author or where it was published, but what they did was they did VO2 max testing, but they trained on an ergometer that only used the right arm and right leg. So you're only using the right side of the body. So you train the right side of the body, and after the training period was over, 12 weeks or whatever, they would go and test the right side of the body. And I'll just make up numbers, but arbitrarily they found that VO2 max on that side increased by 20%. Then when they tested the whole body, when you're using right and left side, VO2 max mysteriously increased by 10%. And then when they went and tested the untrained side, they found that there was no improvement in VO2 max. So what that study demonstrated is that VO2 max was not something that was going on in the cardiac and vascular system. It was something that was going on in the periphery, in the skeletal muscle. So what we think of as cardio actually isn't cardio at all. It's actually physiologic adaptations that we are invoking in the skeletal muscle. And the majority of the cardiac and vascular improvements are really autonomic adjustments to these peripheral adaptations.
fascinating. And I hope all of our listeners who have maybe tuned in about Ovadia heart health, you just got a great lesson in what is beneficial and say the origins of cardio. And that was actually it is a video I'll send out to clients of various TV. Cardio doesn't exist. I believe that's one of your
And that's a
clips.
little bit of hyperbole, but the message was to try to counter this, like bred into the lexicon of society that steady state and cardiovascular are one and the same, when in fact they're not linked in that way.
Right. And it is really it is almost like the word is defined in Webster's dictionary, cardio, right? That there has to be a certain exercise. One of the things we try to encourage within not only our patients, but just the public in general, is the benefits of stronger quality muscle in terms of longevity. And maybe this is kind of segueing into a little bit of some of the things that you talk about in your, I don't know whether to call it a lecture or not, but your talk area, the area under the curve, right? And maybe this kind of goes into that, this cardiovascular benefits from muscular skeletal muscle particular training.
Yeah. So yeah, one of the things that people really have kind of gotten wrong is to think that aerobic adaptations are best produced by low intensity. There's a huge movement now advocating for zone 2 training, which is basically defined as low effort output over a long span of time as the best way to improve VO2 max. So what most people don't understand is that the metabolism that occurs in the mitochondria is completely dependent upon substrate that comes from anaerobic metabolism or higher intensity work. So until you take glucose through a 20-step process to convert it to pyruvate, you don't have any substrate to put into the mitochondria to increase VO2 max, to increase the oxygen consumption. So it is possible to recruit only these lower order motor units and improve your oxygen consumption. But to do that, you're going to have to be on a low intensity ergometer for 45 minutes to an hour, 5 days a week. But if you bring in these higher order motor units, what happens is you are now delivering substrate from anaerobic metabolism into the mitochondria at a much faster rate. So this is why you see these high intensity interval protocols producing improvements in VO2 max that are just as good as steady state exercise, but in a fraction of the time. You can get improvements in VO2 max with 3 to 5 minutes of high intensity interval training that would take you 45 minutes to an hour, 5 days a week. And it's simply because by raising the intensity and invoking these higher order motor units, you are delivering substrate for the lower order motor units in the mitochondria to metabolize at a more rapid rate. The other thing that I would like to address about the VO2 max is there's an assumption that a higher VO2 max correlates with lower all-cause mortality. And there's lots of well-done studies that demonstrate this. But they're thinking that that is coming primarily from the level of VO2 max correlating with the beneficial health outcomes. But there's a very interesting study called the Toronto Firefighter Study, where they took a huge number of firefighters and they measured everyone's VO2 max. And then they retroactively applied that towards different health parameters in these firefighters. And what they found is, just like it is in a general population, there are a few outliers that have really high VO2 max, like a Lance Armstrong kind of person. And then other people in the study had a very modest VO2 max, like at the 40th percentile. And having the higher VO2 max didn't necessarily correlate with a better health outcome. They took all these people and then they applied a training protocol to them. And what they found It's not the absolute level of VO2 max of a given individual that matters. It's whether they took an existing level of VO2 max and did something to marginally improve it. So if we took an untrained person with a really high VO2 max and another person with a VO2 max at the 40th percentile and improved that VO2 max through an exercise regimen that improved it by 15%, this person showed the improved health outcome, whereas the person with a high VO2 max that did not exercise does not show a health improvement. So it's not the VO2 max that correlates with the health benefit. It's the type of activity that you do to try to improve your VO2 max that confers the health benefit. So it's sort of a reversal of cause and effect when people go to interpret the meaning of VO2 max. The absolute level of it does not matter. The relative level and whether you have done the kind of activities that will improve VO2 max is what confers the health benefit.
And in your work, you've trained thousands of individuals. Is it possible at any age to see these all, health benefits? Or is this age related?
So the biological adaptability of skeletal muscles preserved throughout the lifespan. And what we have found almost universally training clients is that older clients and more deconditioned clients are the ones that have the most rapid rate of improvement because they have a skeletal muscle adaptability that has lied dormant for so long that when you wake it up, the rate of improvement is really quite steep as compared to someone that may be a little bit better conditioned. So really, the worse off you think you are, the more it is that you should do it, and the more rapid and profound your improvement will be.
Well, that's very inspiring. I hope some of our listeners caught that. We do have a comment, mind blown about the VO2 max. So great information for our listeners. And I just want to remind everyone, do use the comment sections for Dr. McGuff, this is an incredible opportunity.
Just on the VO2 max thing, another thing that stands out to me about the reversal of cause and effect is there's lots of literature out there correlating grip strength in elderly people with health parameters and longevity. It's not the grip strength. It's whether you are doing the kind of activities that results in an improvement in strength that allows you to demonstrate a higher grip strength. It's not the absolute level of grip strength. It's whether you took your existing level of grip strength and improved it through the kind of activities that will invoke that adaptation. It's not the absolute level. It's whether you did something, i.e. exercise, to improve it.
Oh, another sort of inspirational tip there. And I love the visual on the muscle recruitment here. And that's one piece I'm not going to forget. Let's just dive a little bit in. One of the things that, when I first read your book, Body by Science, and for those of you who don't know, the author with John Little, Body by Science, Dr. Doug McGuff, is your clients don't train very many days a week.
No.
And can you there'll be listeners out there that know everything, little detail about your training protocols, but many who don't.
Yeah.
Can you let us in on a little insight of why you don't train so frequently and sort of the whole basis around that?
So, yeah. Remember earlier we talked about most people think of exercise as something that directly causes a change in the body. Does not work that way. Exercise is a stimulus that acts upon your body. The stimulus is actually that you recruit those motor units and you fatigue them. So as you go through a bout of exercise, you're using a higher and higher percentage of your ever decreasing strength. So it's that decreasing strength that is actually the threatful stimulus to the body. We have to remember that movement is our most preserved biologic function as an animal. Without movement, we can't get food and we can't keep from becoming food. So when we fatigue ourselves very deeply, that poses a threat to movement. So having received that stimulus, your body then synthesizes an adaptation. That adaptation is to synthesize more skeletal muscle, make it thicker, bigger, and stronger, and provide all of the metabolic subsystem improvements necessary to support it. But the thing you got to remember is your body is producing those adaptations, and those adaptations take time. Let's just say randomly that we're going to put a pound of muscle on someone through this process. Well, if you pick up a pound of ground round at the grocery store and look at that, you got to think, my body has to synthesize that de novo. That takes time. And if you introduce an exercise stimulus back to the body before it's completed its adaptation, it will interfere with the adaptation. So you have to allow enough time to pass by for the body to complete its adaptation. The higher the stimulus intensity, like what we do, where the muscle's continuously loaded and fatigued, the longer the recovery period to synthesize the adaptation. So in my studios, most clients train at most twice per week. Some train every 5th day. The majority end up training once every 7 days. The workouts themselves, because when you invoke that kind of intensity, when you're lifting a weight that's challenging and you're doing it to complete fatigue, the intensity of that's quite high. So you really can't stand a workout that's much longer than 15 or 20 minutes. So our workouts are very brief, but they're intense. Because the stimulus intensity is so high, we need a long enough recovery period for the adaptation to complete. So most workouts are done 15, 20 minutes, 1 or 2 times a week.
Right. And this is, the misnomer. Many people think you're going to be spending hours in the gym to get a certain level of strength. And in your work and with your clients, it's a minimal amount of time investment.
Yeah. And the key to understanding that is you got to make certain that you're comparing apples to apples. What's important is that the skeletal muscle is under the load of the resistance so that you can invoke the fatigue we're talking about. But if you go to your big box commercial gym and you look at most people working out, if you look at your average gym bro, one is they're going to use a form where they lift the weight up in 1 second, lower it in 1 second. And they're going to do about 10 repetitions per set. That means the muscle has been under partial loading because moving that quickly involves some momentum. The muscle's been under partial loading for 10 seconds. And then that person's going to rest and do another set, rest and do another set. They'll accumulate like 5 sets. So by the time they're done, they've had about 55 seconds of muscular loading for those 5 sets that's taken them 25 minutes to do. What we're doing is we're picking a weight that's challenging, but staying under the continuous load of the weight, and we're lifting it slowly, 5 to 10 seconds lifting, 5 to 10 seconds lowering, and we're never doing anything that gets us any respite from being under the load. There's no momentum, there's no locking out, there's no setting it down at the bottom. It's continuously loaded, and we will reach a point of complete muscular fatigue around 90 to 120 seconds. So we only did 1 set, but that was 120 seconds of continuous loading. That's the equivalent of doing 10 sets the gym bro way. So when you actually look at the time of muscular loading accumulated during one of my 15 or 20 minute workouts, it's almost double what someone accumulates with a typical approach using the gym bro approach in a commercial gym. So while it seems like a lot more volume and a lot more effort expended, when you actually look at the real muscular loading, what we're doing in my studios exceeds that. That's why we get a better depth of fatigue, a greater stimulus, and a need for more recovery.
Right. Definitely the cliche term, bigger bang for your buck, for sure, right? You're getting more time on the muscle under load. I just want to remind everyone, if you've got a comment or question, there's a question here. I believe it's a question. No study tried to find the root cause of longevity that is indicated by VO2 max or grip strength, with a question mark. I believe you're asking, is there any study or any references in terms of numbers? I'm not sure if you have a different approach to that question right there, Doug.
My answer is not to my knowledge, because the immediate assumption was to draw the correlation between VO2 max and grip strength and assume that it was causatory. I would say that there are some recent studies looking at absolute levels of VO2 max versus improvement of VO2 max as it relates to health parameters. And I can't name them off the top of my head, but they do exist if you go into Google Scholar and just ask the question, or even ask an AI engine, particularly it's Open Evidence. If you ask that search engine just the question, it will find those things for you.
Right.
Because the Toronto firefighter study is one that actually uncovered that, yeah, it's not just the VO2 max that's causative, it's just a correlative.
Right. And then, your point about that, it's that overall increase, right? From where you are to that next level in terms of either of these quantities, not just the per strength, exact grip strength number.
Right.
And
we do this all the time. We do it with, medical testing and blood work. We think that the marker is the direct correlate to the health parameter, when in fact it's a downstream marker of other things that are actually important to the health parameter.
And everything in context, right? If you're a completely deconditioned individual and your increases, it's going to be different than someone who's conditioned, and the level you can reach. Well, not everyone can come to your facility in there. What would be some simple steps? I mean, we've sent videos to individuals on your Big 5 workout. What in general, if someone wants to try to get the maximum benefits of your training protocol without coming to your studio, or where would they start? Well, I'd say first by the book, right?
And you can start at home or in a commercial gym. They both work great. The important thing is not necessarily the equipment or the exact protocol. The important thing is the effort, because what you really want to do is you want to recruit all those different motor unit fiber types and recruit them sequentially and invoke a degree of fatigue. And, in a commercial gym, I would pick very simple movements that are straightforward to perform. That's why we chose the Big 5. There's nothing magical about those movements. We wanted something that was easy, that did not require a lot of concentration for coordination, so that you could focus your concentration on effort. The way to do that is to, even if you're doing freehand exercise, like a deep knee bend or something like that, is just to slow the movement down so that momentum cannot take over for you. So when you lift, whether it's doing a push-up or a chest press or a squat, a deep knee bend or a leg press on a machine, make certain that your movement in the lifting phase is 5 to 10 seconds, and then lower over 5 to 10 seconds. So the muscle's continuously loaded. If you just do this with freehand exercise, you will very quickly feel a significant perceived level of effort and fatigue kicking in within the first 2 or 3 repetitions. But if you keep doing that to the point where it's impossible to keep your cadence up, where the speed starts to bog down, or when you actually can't move the weight anymore, if you go to that point, then you have recruited all of the muscle fibers possible and fatigued them. Doing that places a big demand on all of the metabolic subsystems that support that. So all of your metabolic systems and your cardiovascular system will all be maximally stimulated by that, and you will feel it, and you will understand why the workout has to be short. And you can do that under your own supervision. Just go into a gym, pick a weight that seems reasonable, lift and lower it slowly and smoothly, and do it until it gets really, really hard. And if you've done that, you are light years beyond almost any other exercise regimen you could do.
Great. And sometimes it's the biggest step is just getting there, right? Walking through the door and get going.
So,
Um,
also for your listeners, if they ever want to try to seek out a supervised experience, either on a long-term basis or just to get a benchmark of what it's like for if they want to do it self-supervised, if you go to that at the end, they'll show you a website, the drmcguff.com website. Across the top, there's a header that says find trainers. And if you go under that on a state-by-state basis, you can look where there are different studios around the country that might be in your area if you wanted to do this on a supervised basis, even if just for one time to get an acclimation as to what we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. We've got the website right here, drmcguff.com. And definitely, I'm a big proponent. Obviously, I mentioned I had a long career as a professional dancer, did gymnastics as a child. Is take a lesson. Go actually train with somebody. If you don't have the means to do it on a regular basis, you at least have that body of knowledge
Yeah.
in your body, because no one learned to ride a bike by reading a book.
Yeah.
You get on it and you try it. So advocates.
That's an important point. And I have a colleague that runs a website called automatedmuscle.com. He has essays on there. But he makes an excellent point that exercise is not just exercise or working out. It is a practice. And a lot of what determines how aggressively you can recruit and fatigue muscle is whether you are practiced at mastering the skill of doing that. Because what really inhibits our ability to tap into the higher order motor units and the best benefits of exercise is something that a researcher out of South Africa named Timothy Noakes discovered, called the central governor. We all have in our brains, in our central nervous system, a governor that places a limit on how much we will allow ourselves to exert. And it's the repeated practice of doing exercise in a meaningful way. The repeated practice is what allows that central governor to start to release the brakes to allow us to do more and more demanding things. When we first start, that central governor is very highly regulated and turned on to a very great degree. But as we become more practiced and masterful of what we're doing, that central governor releases the brakes more and more so we can achieve more meaningful levels of exercise. So the point you make about your dancing and your gymnastics, that it's not just exercise, it's actually a practice and a skill that we need to do and to cultivate over a lifetime, is a very important concept.
Really appreciate that. And anytime we can highlight Professor Tim Noakes, all of us have trained in his nutrition courses with the Nutrition Network. One of my cherished photos is my graduation with Professor Noakes in the photo.
Very cool.
Yes.
I mean, he's very, very, very famous in the the nutrition realm. But in my opinion, one of his most important discoveries, which he pretty much single-handedly was able to demonstrate and refute the work of A.V. Hill that did the original research on VO2 max testing. His whole concept of the central governor, I think, is one of the most paramount discoveries in all of exercise physiology.
Well, I'm going to have to dig up that manuscript and pull it out. This brings us to, since we segued to Tim Noakes, Professor Noakes, or Prof Noakes, as a lot of people call him. Briefly, what about nutrition? What role does that play in how you work with your clients, with your patients? We obviously have philosophy where we are more orientated in the whole foods. We're using that word lately of we see it as an individual basis, but any insight on how you work with individuals? Because obviously in a training situation, that's going to come up. What do
Yeah.
you eat? What do you think I should eat?
So two things. One is I absolutely believe that the harder I train my clients, the better nutrition becomes, because you have created a necessity for adequate nutrient intake. And in the absence of eating nutrient dense foods are important, because until you reach nutrient saturation, appetite will continue to be driven until nutrients are satisfied, even if that produces a caloric excess and storage of body fat. So what I tell my clients is a very simple heuristic regarding their eating. And all nutrition begins with the sun. The sun acts on plants and phytoplankton, who undergo photosynthesis to convert sunlight to energy. And you can eat those things, and you can convert them into meaningful substrate for your body. There are other animals that eat those things. You can eat those animals. There's animals that ate the animals that ate the plants. You can eat those. There's animals that ate the animals that ate the animals that ate the plants, and you can eat those, and you move up the food chain. And the higher up the food chain you go, the greater the nutrient density. And as long as you stay on a straight pathway between you and the sun, everything works out fine. Your body will extract nutrients. It will do so in an energy efficient manner that does not result in the accumulation of excess body fat. Where the problem occurs is when you deviate off that straight line. And the way you deviate off is through processing. And processing will generally do two things. It will dilute the nutrient density, and it will increase the caloric density. So to the extent that you consume processed foods, you're going to have less nutrient density, more caloric density, and also a lot of substances that are mingled in with it, chemicals that are going to disrupt the signaling mechanisms of your body to make nutrient processing less efficient and body fat storage more likely. So that's kind of how I address it. And what that boils down to is, yes, a whole food diet. And a whole food diet that focuses on being higher in the food chain rather than lower on the food chain. You can go very low on the food chain and just eat purely plants, but it's going to be hard because the nutrient density is less, because it's not concentrated as it moves up the food chain. Mm. You can do it in a pinch, you can do it if you have to, but I wouldn't do it by choice.
All right. Great way to think about it. We've got some fabulous information, not only for ourselves here on the Ovadia team, but for our listeners. A little selfish here, but we have two wings of our company. We have our telemedicine practice with Dr. Ovadia, and we have our employee wellness programs, which are metabolically health focused. If you want to know more about those, the link is right here. I'm old enough, and I just got back from my 50-year high school reunion, so that'll give you a little date if you want to do the math there. What could employers do? Reason I missed my age is I was back in the era when it was corporate fitness. That's all we did, right? It sort of morphed into more comprehensive things with nutrition and various things. In the original, we were just trying to get people to exercise more. What do you think in our current state right now employers could do to, what is some low-hanging fruit or some ideas that you would offer to them to start initiating this awareness about better strength training?
Yeah, for one, when they're trying to invoke some sort of corporate wellness program, is to be less corporate, not use these silly apps that base their assumptions on time spent. So for instance, most employers will use some sort of app that looks at your Strava or your Apple Watch or, your Fitbit. And creates a time-based requirement. It doesn't count unless it's 30 minutes, and the more you accumulate, the better, which basically reinforces just sort of sweet nothings. If you really want to invoke corporate wellness, you need to do two things. One is you need to seek out someone such as yourself to help guide them and to install within their company a champion for doing this, and then create a facility and space where that can be achieved. And then carve out designated time for each employee in that corporation to go to that space and achieve that workout under the supervision of the champion or someone hired to do it. So if you could spare 300 square feet to have a handful of resistance training machines and someone that knows how to supervise it, and someone gets a 20 or 30 minute break during the course of their workday, 1 or 2 days a week, and they go down there and have a supervised session, it's done properly in a room that's kept at 61 degrees. They don't even got to change out of their work clothes, and they will not sweat. And you can take them through 3 to 5 movements, complete muscular fatigue in a matter of 15 minutes, and they're back at their desk. And they've achieved more to improve their health in 15 to 30 minutes a week than all this other nonsense they're doing, having people put in their biometric data into some sort of app that they can then send through HR that rubber stamps it and says, because all that's just window dressing for we care about the health and wellness of our employees. It's not real health and wellness. They really wanted to do it, they would create a space that's appropriate for doing it and a champion to help administer it.
Less corporate is a great tagline on there. And anyone listening, if you're an employee at a company, start having the conversation with individuals, oftentimes from the grassroots up. If your company starts to see that people are interested in something you just might start the momentum there for that.
I've done consultation on this a few times. The last time was an IT company in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they set up a small studio, and they had 2 or 3 people that had read my book and were interested in administering it. And they had a really high participation rate, and it has really improved their productivity, decreased their sick days. It is an investment well worth making. The return on that investment in terms of potential reduced health premiums, lost days of work, the payback for that is just way disproportionate. It's worthwhile doing.
100%. And again, if you want to reach out and know more about and have a consultation with Doug, you can get him at drmcguff.com. If you would like to know also about one of our case studies, a manufacturing company that we're working with in Pennsylvania, check out our case study there, ovadiahearthealth.com /case study. We're very excited. We're in year 3 there, and a different avenue for us. They have 3 shifts in a rural area in Pennsylvania, trying to give individuals and company a chance to get metabolically fit. As we come up kind of close towards the time, are there anything, Doug, that you were hoping to, sort of share with our listeners? Any new projects or just anything we haven't touched on at all you think is lacking?
No, you've done an excellent job drawing out, the really high points of what we need to talk about. I think probably if there was any message I could get across, the thing that when I'm talking in consultation with people that contact me, the biggest problem I think there is a lot of people spend a whole lot of time trying to understand and acquire information, when I think that people need to have a much stronger bias towards action. It does not have to be perfect. Skeletal muscle and the metabolism that supports it is ancient and highly evolved. So it does not have to be perfect. Just get started. Even if it's in your own living room, just get started, because the early adaptations for someone that's not been exercising are so steep and rapid that that's where the good stuff is. Do not put that off. As you become more and more conditioned and better, that starts to level off and becomes much more incremental. But the good stuff is at the beginning. And don't try to understand deeper, acquire more information, research it more. You know enough already. Just get started. And you'll be amazed what a difference it can make.
That is such incredible advice. I can tell you, I had spent most of my life working on my flexibility, my, all of the things that required for a professional dancer. I didn't really get serious about resistance training till age 60. And it was like a rocket. I was like really excited for myself because
Yeah.
I'd never done that before. So I encourage anyone, just get started.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's amazing when you first start. Even thinking back to when I was a teenager, when I first started doing it, it is the closest thing to magic or a miracle that you will ever experience.
Well, for our listeners, it's a great high note to start wrapping up here again. To reach Dr. McGuff, you go to his website, drmcguff.com. Check out their studio. Also, I use the word studio. You can tell I was a dancer. Exercise. Well, you have it. Exercise studio, right? There you go. We're on the same wavelength. And just get started. Highly recommend those of you, Body by Science. It's one of these books that's got lots of little marks and things in it for myself.
But don't finish the book before you get started. Get started while you read the book.
Great tip. You must start. Actually, you're going to have to do a new version that says you need to start working out before you enter this book. Excellent. Well, I'm thoroughly honored you took the time to talk with us. A wealth of information.
I appreciate it.
And keep us abreast of anything that you've got new on the horizon. Thanks again, and thanks to our listeners. And the recording will be up. If you missed the live session, catch the recording and check us all out.
Perfect. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.